It is now my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Congressman Adam Schiff. Born in Framingham, Massachusetts, Schiff moved west with his family at a young age and graduated from high school in Danville, California, about 30 miles east of San Francisco. He earned his bachelor's degree at Stanford University and a law degree at Harvard University. Prior to entering the world of politics, Schiff clerked for a federal judge and later spent 6 years as a federal prosecutor in Los Angeles, where he successfully led a criminal case against Richard Miller, the first FBI agent to be indicted and convicted for spying for Russia. Schiff served 5 years as a California state senator before winning a seat on the U.S. House of Representatives, a position he has held since 2001. He represents California's 30th House District, which includes parts of northern Los Angeles County. Over his 22 years as a federal lawmaker, Schiff has held major positions on important House committees, including the Appropriations Committee. He previously served as chairman of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. Schiff also took on the role of lead House manager during the first Senate impeachment trial of former President Donald Trump in 2020. And Mr. Schiff is currently running for election to the United States Senate. It is now my pleasure to welcome Congressman Schiff to the podium.
How you doing tonight? Are you excited about graduating? Come on, graduates, are you excited about today? All right. Well, it is such a pleasure to join you, and listening to your valedictorian and your classmates. What an incredibly impressive group of student leaders. And John, I was delighted to learn that you're going to be joining the U.S. Supreme Court. And I only have two things to say about that. Thank God. And how soon can you start? Chancellor and Dean Fagman, Board Chair Agnelucci, representatives of the University of California Office of the President, graduates, I am so thrilled to be with you, and I want to particularly thank the 3L Council for inviting me to speak to you, and all of the staff who made this glorious ceremony possible. What a thrill it is to see all of you graduates, to see your proud, beaming families. It is just magnificent to join you on this day of celebration and accomplishment for you and your families. Graduates, as you know, this is the season of advice giving, so prepare yourselves. I am here to share with you my thoughts as you enter the legal profession, as you are soon to become officers of the court. Let me begin by quoting the author Russell Baker, who once said on a similar occasion, "The best advice I can give anybody about to go out into the world is this: don't do it." But joking aside, I need to tell you at this time that you are entering the real world. Practically every institution of our democracy that we hold dear and have taken for granted is at risk. It is quite a moment at which we find ourselves meeting today to welcome you into the practice of law and to enlist you in the defense of the rule of law. For today, the United States of America, the center of gravity of democratic governance on earth, democracy itself is in serious trouble. There is no sense in pretending otherwise. This is the world you face and the responsibility you inherit. Throughout all of our lives and the lives of your parents and grandparents, we have lived in a world that seemed ever increasing in its freedom, with more people enjoying a free press, better able to practice their faith, speak their peace, assemble with whom they would assemble, and love whom they would love. We saw new countries being born and walls coming down, and the extension of freedom and democracy seemed as inevitable as gravity. As Martin Luther King Jr. once said, the moral arc of the universe may be long, but it bends towards justice. And it was bending towards justice. It was for so long, until suddenly it wasn't. Until not new democracies, but new autocracies were being born. Until new autocrats took power, constraining, not expanding, the freedom of their people. And most ominous, until we witnessed the same degradation of our own democracy, the loss of our own rights, and the destruction of democratic norms we thought inviolate, but which were broken with seeming effortlessness and impunity. And we learned from this terrible spectacle that democracy is not inevitable, that it is not an immutable law of nature, that in fact each generation in its own way must struggle to perpetuate the greatest of all experiments in self-governance, the United States of America. How did we get here? I will begin by saying that the danger to our democracy can be traced to an economy that is just not working for millions of people. In part as a result of globalization and automation, we have seen a huge disruption in the American workforce. Middle-class families are desperately afraid of falling out with no safety net, just one work problem or one health problem away from failure. While working-class families struggle to pay their bills, provide health care for their kids, or even keep a roof over their heads. Economic challenges are part and parcel of the challenges to our democracy. We know this from our history. After all, when FDR pulled a country whose economy was in full collapse up from its knees, his vigorous New Deal policies saved not only the American economy, but its democracy as well. For during the Great Depression, both were equally at risk. In our own time, millions of Californians wonder if they'll ever enjoy the quality of life their parents had, and have the most profound concerns about the future for their children. It may seem counterintuitive that at a time of historic low unemployment, that the economy should be threatening our democracy. But the problem isn't that people are not working. The problem is that they are working and are still not earning enough to find a place to live or to get by. The size of our economy and the employment of our people alone do not measure what is most vital. And that is, what is the quality of our lives? Addressing a different graduating class some 50 years ago, Robert Kennedy articulated the deficiencies of measuring our people's well-being by our country's raw output. He said, the gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play. It does not include the beauty of our poetry or the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of our public debate, or the integrity of our public officials. It measures neither our wit, nor our courage, neither our wisdom, nor our learning, neither our compassion, nor our devotion to our country. It measures everything, in short, except that which makes life worthwhile. And it can tell us everything about America except why we are proud that we are Americans. Just as in Roosevelt's day, we have once again our own tent cities. But just as in Roosevelt's day, we have the power to do something about it. Don't let anyone tell you that the deeply personal dilemmas faced in households throughout this state and across this country, dilemmas that taken together become our national dilemma, are simply the result of the impersonal forces of the market. To a much more substantial degree, they are the result of policy choices and how we have responded to the changing nature of work. During the pandemic, the U.S. Congress more than doubled the child tax credit, and this act alone lifted more than 40% of the children in America living in poverty out of poverty. In this simple and powerful instance, it becomes clear that poverty is a policy choice. And the question then becomes, how much poverty are we willing to accept? How many hungry children? How much lost opportunity? How many unfulfilled lives can we be content with while telling ourselves it's just the way of the world, and solutions are beyond our capability or comprehension. Because we know better. We know that is a lie. We know that we are not powerless to affect our circumstance. On the contrary, we have the ability, all the tools that we need to chart our own destiny, to decide what we want of the country we live in and the California that we love, what we want it to look like, and to make it so. When it's your job to improve the lives of the American people and you don't do it, it's a choice. When Congress let that child tax credit expire, allowing millions to fall back into poverty, but preserved tax breaks for hedge fund managers, it furthered a vision of America that has given up on even the pretense of a fair society. A vision which says that we are not all in this together, that confers favors on the influential private interests and ignores the public good, grows heedless to the needs and the voices of the many, a vision that fails to invest in the American people and their future. Time after time, history has shown us that when we do invest in our most critical infrastructure, ourselves, our friends, our neighbors, our family, our community, and the stranger, it pays the richest dividends the world has ever known. The creation of the American middle class was neither providential nor accidental. The American middle class didn't just happen. Rather, it became to be because people with an ounce of political courage willed it into existence. But when we fail to have that courage and ignore the needs of working people as their economic destiny slips from their hands and their bargaining power is stripped away, as jazz-age income inequality returns and Washington just shrugs, then we fail to deliver on the promise of our democracy. That's when we make ourselves vulnerable to a demagogue who comes along and promises that he alone can fix it. And that's where the threat to democracy becomes existential. And that's also where you come in. This is the America into which you graduate today. You will be officers of the court. But what does that really mean, officers of the court? You will take an oath to support the Constitution. And then the question will be, what does it mean to support and defend the Constitution? For it will be a rare day indeed when you're confronted with someone who declares, I am here to attack the Constitution. Now do your duty to defend it. So what does your oath really require? And how will you know when it is your responsibility to step forward? The oath of office I took as a new member of Congress and take every session contains the same requirement of supporting and defending the Constitution. And yet I've seen how little it means to so many of my colleagues, many of whom I had admired and respected, notwithstanding our deep differences of ideology, because I believed that they believed what they were saying. But as it turned out, none of that really mattered to them. Not when weighed against the interest in higher office or holding office. The historian Robert Caro once said that power doesn't corrupt as much as it reveals. It doesn't always show us for our best, but it says a lot about who we are. Well, power revealed a lot about the people I serve with, and it also revealed a lot about the country, about a deep vein of bigotry that has run through it since its founding, that was always there to be tapped by a demagogue. Power also revealed that some of my colleagues, like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, were people of great courage and conviction. And by the way, I love the parody of our January 6th committee on Saturday Night Live, when the actor playing Liz Cheney says, people keep asking me, how did I develop such a tough spine, such a strong inner core? Well, how do you think you would turn out if Dick Cheney had been reading you bedtime stories? But power revealed Cheney and Kinzinger to be the exception, not the rule. Courage may be contagious, but we would learn so is cowardice. Because no one would speak out, no one would speak out. My takeaway after 2 impeachments And an insurrection is simply this: you can have the best written Constitution in the world, and I believe that we do. You can have the best written laws meant to constrain the worst impulses of human nature, and maybe we do. And none of it will be enough if people don't give meaning to their oath of office. And if that oath isn't informed by ideas of right and wrong, and if people don't accept the basic truth, or even that there is something called fact, none of it will be enough. Of all the corrosive attacks on our democracy, the most destructive has been this relentless assault on the truth. In a world in which a public servant like Anthony Fauci is made a villain, and a villain like George Santos is made a public servant, a world in which the truth is for losers and suckers, our democracy cannot long survive. For if we don't have a common basis of fact to decide who should govern or what our policies should be, then what is there to fall back upon except division, distrust, anger, and violence? Graduates, America needs you as officers of the court to defend our democracy, to uphold the Constitution and the rule of law, to speak the truth, and to give meaning to your oath. And it begins by asking, what does the oath mean to you? For some, it will mean a career in public service or public office. And I must tell you, we desperately need your generation to seize hold of the reins of power. You are impatient and intolerant in the best of ways. You have no tolerance for racism, no patience for what we are doing to the planet. You do not accept the scourge of gun violence or the inequities of our criminal justice system. You will not abide an economy that leaves people to sleep on the street. You can imagine an America that chooses not to accept poverty, that once again welcomes the immigrant and the stranger and leaves no room for isolation and despair. An America that gives no quarter to the braggart, the bigot, or the bully. And what of you who choose to work in the private sector? Will those who serve in the private sector also serve? Some of the best lawyers I know, some of the greatest advocates I have ever met, work in their firms by day and represent their pro bono clients at night. They fight for voting rights. They monitor polling stations. They take some of the hardest cases to the highest courts. Lawyers who have helped develop civil rights, consumer rights, marriage equality, and so much more. As our economic challenges are deeply intertwined with the challenges to our democracy, attorneys in the private sector can play an invaluable role in championing an economy that works for everyone, that respects the rights and contributions of workers, that believes prosperity should be shared, that rejects the narrow view that quarterly shareholder earnings are all that matters, that builds products that bring us together, not tear us apart, that defend the injured and the weak against the powerful. You can help your clients, whether they are small or large businesses, for-profits or nonprofits, unions or management, officers or individuals, be good citizens. Everyone has a right to a lawyer and to representation, but they don't have a right to you. They don't have a right to demand your talent, your intellect, your industry, your skill be used to further an end that you do not believe is right. You must have the courage both to say yes, but also the courage to say no. Robert Caro's warning about power applies equally to those in the private sector as it does to those in public life, for there are many kinds of power besides political power, like economic power, the power of intellect and influence, physical power, and the power of organization. How will you use your power? How will you treat your coworkers, your customers, your clients, your staff, your spouse? What will power say about you? Will you truly be an officer of the court, or will you be even more? In Micah, it is written, what is required of us to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God. I don't know how much advice I can really offer you for the times when you really need it, but I would say this: when you're confronting those tough questions, when you're trying to decide not only what is right, but what is right for you and for others, ask yourself, is it just? Have I shown mercy or kindness? Have I demonstrated humility? If the answer is yes, you are more than an officer of the court. You have lived up to your oath and more. You have become a vital part of our democracy and the legacy of our founders. Founders who believe that people possess sufficient virtue to be self-governing, that we don't need to be ruled by a despot, that we have a strong enough sense of justice, of kindness and humility to govern ourselves. That will be your contribution to the very idea of America, counselor. Congratulations, graduates, and good luck to you. Now go have dinner with your families, and afterwards, change the world. Thank you.